Hey guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're going to be working on this Snowglobe watermelon tumbler. Now I've had this in my mind for quite a while, but I never envisioned it on a snow globe, and so here we are. So we are going to start out with the transparent watermelon sheets of vinyl from Banff Custom Creations. I just used my measuring mat here and marked them off at 1 inch each, and then figured that the 20-ounce skinny from Craft Haven is 8 inches tall, so I cut 4 inches worth of vinyl in the watermelon rind, and then I cut 4 stripes for the pink and the seeds. And then once I had those cut into 1 inch strips, I just applied them directly to the tumbler. When you're applying them, you want to ensure that the vinyl is completely pressed down flat because there's no glitter underneath it. It's going to show any of the bubbles or any like lifted spots on the vinyl if it's not pressed flat. I'm going to pay special attention to this very first strip of this 1 inch vinyl, because once your first vinyl is laid down completely straight, as long as you're lining up the rest of the strips along the cut lines as you go down the cup, the remainder of the lines are all going to be straight as well. So you just want to ensure that very first strip of vinyl that you're laying down is completely straight and flush with the rim of the cup. And we are going to want to leave just a tiny little bit of that top glass portion exposed, so once we go in with our final coats of epoxy, it has a good base to adhere to. Because we left a tiny little gap at the top of the vinyl, that pushed the bottom of the vinyl down a little bit and pushed it off the base of the tumbler because it was exactly 8 inches. So I just took my edge trimmer and cut that tiny little piece off at the bottom, and then we're gonna go in and work on the snow globe portion. I ended up making an entire 1 cup batch of this liquid for inside of the snow globe. I only used about half a cup total, so you could definitely lower the ratios a little bit to make less if you're only using 1 cup or if you're making 1 cup at a time. But I used a 1/3 cup of this Elmer's Magic Liquid and 2/3 cup of water. I put that into this little squeeze bottle that I got on Amazon, and then I'm gonna take the tumbler and I'm gonna tape off with painter's tape. I'm gonna do it backwards. So I'm gonna put the sticky part for this first tape facing outward, so when we pour the glitter into the top, it doesn't stick to the painter's tape. And then once I've got that measured off, I'm gonna go in with a secondary piece of painter's tape. That one will be flipped around so it's attaching to that first piece of painter's tape and also adhering to the cup to stop that glitter from falling all the way down to the cup and onto your table. After securing all the painter's tape and putting a little bit of the liquid mixture into the cup, I went in with about 30 milliliters of Manifest from Peachy Olive Glitters. As usual, I have a discount code with Peachy. I will link that in the description box, along with all of my other discount codes for you guys to use to save some money. And as we go along and dump this glitter into this little snow globe, I'm gonna put a little bit of liquid in at a time just to make sure that it's not going to get stuck when we flip it over and try to shake the glitter. Sometimes it gets stuck at the base of the tumbler and doesn't move, and we don't want that. Now that the snow globe is completely full of liquid and our glitter, we're gonna go in with just a tiny little bit of rubbing alcohol. That's going to help pop any bubbles that you have. The technical term is gassing it off. You're gonna let that sit overnight, and then once the bubbles are out, you'll see that it's completely clear. There's just one little bubble in there. I'm gonna use a very fine grit sanding block to just sand the base of it to make sure we have good adherence for our epoxy and that the Gorilla Tape that I'm putting over top of this hole is not going to pop off or lift or anything like that once we get the epoxy applied, because you don't want any of this liquid coming out and seeping underneath the epoxy. I made sure to press the tape down really good and make sure that's completely sealed. I'm gonna go in with one thin coat of this CCDIY UV resin, let that cure, and then put a second coat over that just to be extra sure that we're not going to get any of the liquid seeping under the epoxy. After all of the liquid was secure in the tumbler, I put this on my turner and put 30 milliliters of Flynn Sisters fast setting epoxy on this cup. I do have a discount code for you in the description box for that epoxy and for her rhinestones. That is Mitten10 at checkout to save you 10%. I then cut this green opal vinyl at 11.5 width by 0.08 height, lined that between all of these strips of this transparent printed vinyl, and then I went in with this decal that I had my friend Mallory from Made by Manny and Mel make for me as a custom request. I'm a 90s baby, so I absolutely love the Watermelon Crawl song. If you know it, you know it. If you don't, you don't, and you need to go listen to it. So I did make a mistake on this tumbler. I will forewarn you, I'm keeping this, it's not going anywhere. So I would recommend, if you're using any sort of an opal vinyl, and just a side note, I should know this, I know better, I don't know why I did this. Anyways, I would make sure to either put a coat of epoxy between the vinyl stripes and the decal, or I would cut the vinyl stripes around the decal, because you can see that it's lifted or raised a little bit. Because the opal vinyl's on top, it did show that there was some sort of like texture underneath it. So not a huge deal, but you can definitely tell it's there. And then I put the coat of epoxy over that, the Flynn Sisters regular setting epoxy over top of that, let that cure, and then we're gonna go in and start working on the lid. I mixed up 15 milliliters of both glitter and this CCDIY UV resin and applied it to the top of my tumbler. I did not need all of that. I used probably maybe 7.5 to 10 milliliters of this mixture. This pink is called Slay All Day. This is from the newest May Peachy palette. It is not available on the website yet, but it should be within the next week or so. So I'm just gonna be really careful when I apply this not to get anything off of the edges, and we don't want anything touching that little rubber seal for the straw. So just be very cautious, and once you've got it completely laid down and you're gonna go in and torch and pop any of those micro bubbles, you wanna be very quick with your torch because you don't want to melt this little silicone piece that's in here. Because then you're not going to be able to hold your straw in there. I cut out these little watermelon seeds in plain black vinyl just to make sure I was using the correct shape when I'm placing my rhinestones. You can find this on Etsy, Creative Fabrica, they're all over the place. So I just applied those directly over top of that UV resin mixture, and then I'm gonna go in with this black rhinestone mix. These are all different sizes. I believe they range from like SS6 to probably SS20. Those are on the Flynn Sisters Supply Shop website. And then I'm going to lay the seeds down first. Once I've got the black rhinestones on the seeds, I'm gonna go in and we're going to work around the edges first. So I'm gonna work around that little straw hole, and then I'm gonna work around the outer edge. So when we're filling that in, we have a good kind of foundation for our rhinestones. They're not gonna fall off the sides, anything like that. And we'll just fill in as we go. Just a side note, I forgot to mention, I am using Liquid Fusion for the glue, and then I'm using the Crystal Katana from Crystal Ninja as my little picker. Now that both the inner and the outer edges are filled in with this pink mix, this is called Love and Bling from Diamond Fire Rhinestones, I'm just gonna go in and fill in all of the center portion and then it'll be done. Okay, the tumbler is finished. I am so over the moon with how this turned out. It reminds me of my childhood and I love it so much. I will be using it all summer long. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you aren't already. Hit that bell button if you want to get notified of the future tutorials. I have linked my makers group in the description box as well for Facebook, and I will see you guys next weekend.